Welcome back to our last segment of Reaching Out. Our very special guest is Julie Menin, Chair of the Community Board #1. We are actually in her Community Board district, and you wrote an editorial that we want you to talk about, supporting the Wall Street occupiers, also laying the ground rules for their occupation of this park, because you're now considering the Wall Street occupiers your neighbors, and you gave them the good neighbor policy.
Yes, well, first of all, Greg, thanks so much for having me on this show today. So a community board won last night. We voted 33-3 in favor of a resolution that absolutely fundamentally supports the American democratic right to protest and the support for Occupy Wall Street's right to protest, and also saying at the same time we can proactively address quality of life concerns. About a week and a half ago, with Manhattan Borough President Scott Stringer, the community board negotiated a good neighbor policy with Occupy Wall Street to proactively address some of the concerns that we heard from residents and small businesses in the area. They're not mutually exclusive, and so I'm very proud of the action our board took last night to firmly uphold the right to protest.
Yes, and some of those concerns by the, I would say, the residents of this district were?
Basically, people were concerned about drumming late at night. You have a lot of families who live right next to Zuccotti Park who had raised concerns about drumming. So we sat down with Occupy Wall Street. We had very productive meetings with them to proactively address that. And they came back with this good neighbor policy that reduces the drumming to 2 to 4 hours during the day rather than late at night, which we think is a very responsive response. And also the other issue we want to address is off-site bathrooms. So right now, there are no bathrooms here.
Right.
And so we think it's very important. We're calling on the city to help address that issue. The other issue we're calling on is we're calling on the NYPD to remove a lot of these barricades that basically impede access for the residents of the area, for the workers, and for the protesters. It doesn't make sense for the NYPD to basically have this whole area in lockdown mode.
That's right. Well, I see. I noticed the barriers up, and a few weeks ago they were not up. So you're right, and the traffic is really getting congested in this area, and it's just a difficult situation. You have more people here in this park now than ever before, and they are actually sleeping here. You talk about Occupy Wall Street, they're actually living in this park for the last 6 weeks.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's a really interesting history that we have here in Lower Manhattan. We're obviously the nation's first capital, and we've had a long history of protests. Years and years ago, every time there was a major financial crash, thousands of people would actually protest in front of the New York Stock Exchange. That's our history. Here in Lower Manhattan, we're proud of the fact that we are able to witness firsthand protests, whether they be at City Hall, peaceful protests that exercise a fundamental American right to be able to speak your mind. And we think that the resolution that we adopted almost unanimously, 33-3 last night, near unanimously, really addresses that fundamental American right, and yet also takes into account the concerns that were brought to us from residents and small businesses that are adjacent to the site.
Now, you also had another vote before when the controversy with the mosque, and you had that vote. So it seems that you are no stranger to controversy. So you're actually becoming a veteran of controversy.
Well, we like to take strong positions at Community Board 1. We think that that's absolutely our job, to address issues head on, not to shy away from them, but to address them absolutely head on. We firmly stood up for the right to build the Islamic Cultural Center. We had a 29-1 vote on our board to stand up for that fundamental right for freedom of religion. And once again, last night, we stood up for the fundamental right to protest, but also said that you can address quality of life issues. They're not actually mutually exclusive, and we think that's a responsible way to address that.
Now, let me ask you, where are we going to be with the situation of bathrooms? Has there been any movement on that?
So we have asked the city to address the issue of bathrooms. Interestingly, Greg, other cities who are dealing with protests, some of them, like the city of Pensacola, actually did provide bathrooms off-site. So we think it's important that the city address it. We also have the 9/11 Memorial just 2 blocks away from here, and we've got 7 million people who come each and every year to the memorial. So we said to the city, you need to provide off-site bathrooms for that as well.
Sure. I mean, it's a legitimate request. It's something that probably wasn't thought about, that should be thought about.
Absolutely, and providing off-site bathrooms would absolutely address the sanitation issues.
And in this day and age, I mean, I've been to sporting events where they had bathrooms, state-of-the-art bathrooms, come in on trailers, and you would never believe you were in a trailer, and these bathrooms were immaculate. So, I mean, there are ways that we can produce facilities for people to use right now.
There are absolutely many ways, and our resolution that we passed last night urges the city to look at those various ways, and it also urges the city to sit down with the protesters, sit down with the community, sit down with the elected officials and all the stakeholders and have a dialogue, which actually has not happened to date. Right now it's basically been the community and the elected officials and the protesters we've had 9 meetings, but the city has not been a part of that.
That's a shame. We urge the city to participate in it because it does not look like this is going to stop anytime soon, and we might as well make the best of this situation. And hopefully, when it's all said and done and the history books are written, this protest will go down as one that changed the course of America.
Well, that's exactly right. What we've got to focus on is jobs. We've got to push the Obama jobs bill that actually creates jobs through large-scale infrastructure projects, through basically giving money to the states to hire more teachers. That is what we need to do. We've also got to push here in New York State for the extension of the millionaire's tax. Our community board has been on record twice before as supporting that. We think it's imperative that the millionaire's tax be extended, and I hope that from this movement there'll be real attention directed towards those efforts.
You know, you brought up the millionaire's tax. The argument that people and millionaires will leave the state is one that I don't think anyone can make, because the tax is there already. And if you extend it, people haven't left. The people are going to stay here.
Well,
I think there's a stubbornness and an unwillingness to even try to extend the tax because they think they can balance everything on the backs of the public workers, which I think they're going to save $80 million, but the millionaire's tax is $4 billion. And you're not going to make up $4 billion in labor.
Interestingly, a lot of the studies that talk about the millionaire's tax show that people actually do not leave a state because of a millionaire's tax. That is not why they leave. And so those like the mayor that make those arguments, I think, are just not correct on that issue at all. And $4 billion, we need that $4 billion to cut really devastating and disastrous cuts from the budget that really shouldn't be there. And so we strongly urge the governor to approve the millionaire's tax.
Yeah, if people are going to leave, they're going to leave because of the erosion of services. In Nassau County, they're going to outsource their public transportation in buses. And now I understand that there could be some movement to sell the Javits Center to private developers and build there and move the Javits Center and the convention center to Queens, which will be devastating to conventions in this city.
Well, and I think you really hit the nail on the head in terms of erosion of services. If our schools are overcrowded, if we don't have adequate health care facilities, if we're constantly cutting jobs, people will leave the state. But they're not going to leave the state because of the extension of the millionaire's tax.
That's right. But, Julie, I'm sorry, that's all the time we have for this segment. This has been a special edition of Reaching Out with Gregory Floyd. My guests earlier, Jason Ahmadi, Bill de Blasio, public advocate. Jason is one of the original Wall Street occupiers, and I have a very special guest and friend, Julie Menin, chair of Community Board 1.
Thank you.
Thank you.